Welcome to the next episode of the HR Mavericks podcast. I'm Garrett Justice, and today I'm joined by Leslie Carver, who's the CEO at Carver Connections out in Ohio. Leslie, how are you doing today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. I know that you recently joined the HR Mavericks community, and we're super excited to have you and your wealth of experience that you bring. Super excited to dive into our topic today. But before we do, tell our listeners just a little bit more about you and your background and also your company, Carver Connections.
Sure. Well, I've been in HR for a little over 20 years, and I'd love to say that was very intentional, but I actually kind of stumbled into the field. And once I was there, I knew it was where I was meant to be. So I love people. I love being able to help in any way I can. I think my passion is more of helping people develop and grow in all kinds of areas. As far as my experience goes, I've been with small companies. I've been with large companies. I've been in healthcare, higher ed, community agencies, and I'm even a substitute teacher. So I spend time in the public school system. And if there's people, you can find me there.
That's awesome. So, you kind of hinted at this a little bit. And one of the things I like to ask a lot of our guests is, what got you into HR? You kind of mentioned that with people, but what's really kept you in the HR space for your career?
Well, this may sound a little, I don't know, I don't want to say goofy or like pie in the sky kind of idea, but when you finally realize that you can make a difference, and it's, making a difference in the life of an employee. And that can be something as simple as just connecting them with information that they didn't know existed, because employees are so busy doing their job, whatever it is they're hired to do, their technical abilities, their skills. So they aren't as well versed in the whole HR side of things. And you don't know what you don't know. So I love being the connector of that. And as time has gone on, being able to see not only do you make a difference for an employee and allow them to perform better at work, you're also giving a lot of information to their families. And then as that family grows in knowledge, they become better advocates of themselves, they also spill over into the community. So it's just a really cool ripple effect. And I love that we can all make a difference. So this is my space to do it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I can definitely see that. There's, very few other departments that can have such an impact on the lives of people as HR, right?
Right,
And so
right.
that's awesome. Yeah. So you've worked at small companies, you worked at large companies, and now Carver Connections, your own company. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I work at my own company.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny. My husband made just an offhand remark a few years ago. He's like, you'll never be fully happy until you're working for yourself. And I was kind of laughing. And then I thought about what he said. And I thought, you know what? He might be right, because I don't have to discipline employees. I don't have to deliver a lot of bad news. I just get to help. And so he had mentioned that, planted that seed in my mind, and one thing led to another. And I thought, why not? What do I have to lose? You can always work for someone else, but try following your own path, what you were created to do. And I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad he made that comment.
That's awesome. So right now, with Carver Connections, what types of businesses and what types of problems do you focus on helping them solve?
So I tend to work with a lot of smaller employees or employers, only because they're the ones that are juggling the most hats. So you might have an owner, and I consider small, like less than 50 or even 50 to 100, depending on what the organization is like. And that owner is the owner. They are the ones with the ideas and where the business needs to go. But they're also trying to train employees, and they're trying to be marketing, and they're trying to be accounting. And the last thing they can really do is be HR, but they need it. So I found being able to step in a little bit, and I like to refer to myself as a translator sometimes, because in the HR world, you can have so many abbreviations and just terms that are thrown around that if you're not part of that and you haven't spent time in it, it can be overwhelming. So I like to jump in where I can. And that's even, it's being able to help people with resumes a little bit. That's not quite what I really love to do. But again, if it's helping a person and you're saying, I need help, then I'm your person. I'm going to jump in. Where if it's the local library, you'll find me there,
Yeah. That's awesome. You can tell that in just a couple of minutes of talking with you that you're definitely a people person, love helping. So that's awesome.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited to talk about our topic today. I know, in the past, you've spent some time really focused on benefits
Yes.
in previous roles and kind of have some of
Mhm.
that expertise. And today we want to talk a little bit more about the power of storytelling, specifically when it comes to employee benefits. So
Mhm.
before we jump into this topic, tell us a little bit more about why you wanted to talk about this topic specifically today.
Yeah, well, I've always been a natural storyteller. I didn't realize it. Again, my wonderful husband of now almost 30 years pointed out from the time I met you, you told stories. And I'm like, I told stories as a kid. Like that was fun. But and storytelling is something that's been done for so long. If you look back, just over civilization, it's been done as a way to entertain, or we look at movies. We love to go watch a movie because it's telling a story of some kind. But then it was also done to educate before books were available, before all these writings were available. These stories were passed down from generation to generation. So we can learn so much. And even when you think about history, there is so much to learn. And it's one thing to be given facts about something, but it's something totally else when you've got the story piece of it, because you're connecting with another person.
Hmm.
You don't have to be there. You didn't have to witness it yourself, but I think you can start to relate a little bit. And when we do that, we become better listeners, and our knowledge, and like it taps into a different place inside of us. It's easier to remember information.
Yeah.
So as I started with benefits, 20 some years ago, I initially was the fact person. Here is how you go find your doctor, and here is what a deductible is. But then people would say, okay, deductible, copay, co-insurance, what is that? So I naturally told a story. Well, let's say you're outside, playing, and you're doing a volleyball game and you've twisted your ankle and you think that you've broken your ankle. And I said, you have options. If you go to a doctor that's in your network, you're paying a copay. But when you go to that doctor and they say, oh, you may have broken it, then we need to send you for an x-ray. And so then your deductible would kick in, and then co-insurance if you needed to have surgery, or whatever the case was.
Mhm.
And we found that as we shared these, even a fictional story, people went, oh, I get that. They can relate to
Yeah.
something in their life, or, oh, my child went through something similar, but it was his arm in a bicycle accident, or, whatever the case was. So it made this foreign concept kind of come to life a little bit. And I've sort of taken it from there.
I love that. I think that there's definitely power in telling stories. And I think most people would agree with that. It's one of the oldest ways to communicate. Like you mentioned, it helps us remember. And so I love the idea of applying it specifically to employee benefits, because for
Yeah.
so many employees, like you mentioned, it's facts, facts, facts. What does this mean? What does this mean? What's this number? And trying to figure that piece out. But when you can
Right.
really tell a story, that's why it helps them remember and better understand what all this stuff means when it comes to benefits. Is that
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, absolutely. Because it's overwhelming. And then if you think about when benefits are typically covered for an employee, it's when they first start a job.
Hmm.
So they're nervous. They're consuming a lot of information. So they have HR information, they have job specific information, they have supervisor information. You can only retain so much. And your brain, even the most well intentioned person saying, I'm taking notes, I've got this, your brain just gets full and you're
Yeah.
trying to process. And so that retention side of it is missing too, because it's just too much at the same time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I love the example you shared of, the story of, you're playing volleyball and you hurt your ankle and you have to go to the doctor. What other types of stories should HR and benefits, personnel be sharing with employees?
Well, I think it's trying to relate to where that employee is. So, an example, that I give when I would educate employees on benefits. Sometimes we're in a group setting. Occasionally, you're one-on-one, but I think a lot of times you're with other people, maybe other employees starting at the same time, or their benefits are effective at the same time. So, you may have a young single person in their 20s. You may have someone in their mid 30s, their family is growing, they're at a different season of life. So if I'm focusing solely on family type of benefits, or referring to your child this, your spouse that, that
Hmm.
single person is just kind of tuning out a little bit. So it's important to make sure that you have the stories that can relate to that person, as well as, people that are in the empty nest phase. They're
Yeah.
not thinking about, their children. Their children are taking care of themselves. Now they have to look at what are they going through, and are they single or are they in a relationship of some kind? So trying to meet them where they are. So as I educate on benefits, I may not say, for example, I gave 3 examples there. I may not say single person, family person, empty nester, but I will say various things that maybe on this benefit, the family person goes, okay, that makes sense, but maybe on a different benefit. So for example, like disability,
Hmm.
short-term disability, if you're talking to a single employee who is perhaps living on their own, they really need to get what short-term disability is and understand how that affects them. Because
Hmm.
if you are married or if you are further along your life, you might have a savings account. You might have a spouse or a partner to get some income from, but that single person living in an apartment all on their own, they're probably responsible for themselves. So I think
Yeah.
that's important to, just make sure you're not doing one story for everything, but having a variety in there.
Yeah, such a great point. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is when should you be sharing these stories about benefits with employees? So often companies might do one big meeting right before open enrollment to talk
Yeah.
about benefits, and they kind of go through all of the details and answer all of the questions. And like you mentioned, they might be telling stories along there, talking about things that half the people zone out about because they don't really
Right.
care. So is
Yes.
that the right setting, or are there other opportunities where you should be sharing some of these stories with employees to help really explain benefits?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in share often and share always. So, I understand the whole open enrollment thing because at that time, maybe plans are changing. You're offering something new, rates are increasing or decreasing, whatever it is. That's important to say that. But again, going back to when an employee is first hired, that's still a lot of information, even for the employee that is completely vested and wants all of that knowledge. It's still a lot to process. So I always encourage employers, we're going to do it when the employee first starts, for sure, giving that information while knowing they can't retain all of it. So I think it's really important to focus on your benefits monthly as well. Now, one thing
Mm.
I like to do is one benefit a month. So maybe this month it's vision insurance, and maybe next month it's a short-term disability or things along those lines, because you tend to not pay attention to the benefit until you need it. So an example that I'll give for us is long-term care insurance. I've
Mhm.
heard Dave Ramsey, a financial expert, many years ago say, that's so important. People need long-term care insurance. But when you're in your 20s, you're like, whatever. So the term goes in one ear and out the other. As we get a little older and we see things happen to our family and our friends or grandparents, whatever it is, you go, oh, wait, is that what he was referring to?
Mhm.
So we take that same approach with our benefits and start suggesting things. Another perfect example is a flexible spending account. So there are some dental plans that cover braces, and there are some that don't. Well, flexible spending is a great bridge if you don't have a plan that covers braces and your children are old enough for braces. Well, if you mention it, I'll say last year, and mention it this year, one of those months, maybe next year, your child, the dentist says, I think they're going to need braces. And you're going to say, oh, wait, we said something about that. I don't remember the details, but I know my employer talked about it. HR said something. That employee goes to HR and says, hey, what did you say? Do we have coverage or do we not? So you've planted that seed that then
Mhm.
grows when it needs to grow.
Yeah, I love the idea of, in addition to the open enrollment period, one benefit a month, right? And so what's the
Yes.
typical format? What works best? Is that an email sharing a short story about a benefit? Is it, a meeting in person? Is it all of the above? Like, what have you seen work best?
Yes, it's absolutely all the above because each of us learn differently. So you will have some people that can read an email and go, okay, I get it, and they move on. I'm not that kind of person. I love to write, but like if I was listening to our podcast, I'm going to listen and I'm going to watch. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of employers are afraid to put out videos. And I'm like, no, no, no. They're easy. You don't have to have this fancy setup. Just
Yeah.
sit and talk. It can be a 2-minute video. So if you share a video, you've sent an email, maybe you do have a group meeting, or if you have a lunch that goes on or some kind of a team building activity, a 2-minute blurb on something that just says, hey, don't forget you have this benefit and you need to do this. It's always just a nice way to do it. So I say a variety of ways. And also keep in mind, people have different abilities. So if it's someone who might have a hearing impairment, being able to see something visually is really good. If it's a video and you put subtitles on the bottom, which is easy to do today, just think about the different people and where to meet them, and you just can't go wrong. Anything you're trying is better than doing nothing, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. And so, the next question I have for you is really, who does this benefit when you're telling
Mhm.
stories specifically about benefits? There's obviously a benefit for helping employees better understand your benefits,
Right.
but are there others across the organization that this can really benefit?
Yes. And I think it's easy to say it benefits everyone. The one person we can forget that it benefits is actually the people in HR, because the more you are teaching, the more you are repeating, your information is becoming more consistent. So if you think about anytime you start in a job, anytime you start something new, you're kind of testing some things around. And I look at the different trainings, that I do and the different things that I teach. The more I teach it, the better it is. And even as silly as Vacation Bible School. So I am one of the teachers at
Mhm,
our church, and these little groups of kids come in. I normally have 5 in a morning.
mhm,
Well, if you would see my first one at 9 o'clock versus my last one at 11 o'clock, I'm much better at 11. I'm like, oh, I wish
mhm,
I could pull the kids back in. It's the same thing with benefits.
mhm.
So if you are starting to say something, it gets stronger and it gets better. But then it has this ripple effect again. So you mentioned the employee definitely benefits, but the coworkers benefit. So those conversations that happen when leaders are not around, or an employee picks up on their coworker who's down or they're worried, or whatever it is, and it's easy to say, hey, what's going on? And the employee goes, I just found out my kid needs braces and I don't have $5,000, and our dental insurance doesn't cover it. So if that one employee then says, well, there's something with flexible spending, why don't
Mhm.
you go talk to HR? They're empowering each other in that way. And then it even spills outside of work, because again, you're sharing that information in your families, but ultimately work productivity improves. So the managers, the leadership team is seeing, oh, my employees aren't struggling as much because they know we're offering things to make their life better. So it really is a win-win for everyone in the organization and everyone in the community when we do it.
And I think that that's such an important piece to keep in mind, because I know so many of our listeners, are those solo HR people in small businesses,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Where you are that HR generalist with everything on your shoulders. Benefits is only one part of your job. And so,
Right.
I know someone could be listening to this thinking, I don't know if I could fit in a training every month and an email and everything else. But when you can
Yeah.
understand the benefit that comes from doing this, right, it's a little
Right.
bit easier to prioritize that. Is that right?
Right, absolutely. And that's where I would encourage that person too. It doesn't have to be perfect. It does not have to be this beautiful 15-minute video. It can very simply pull out your phone. We see it on social media all the time. Pull
Mhm.
out your phone and say, hey guys, I'm just going to talk for a minute about this benefit. You upload that video to YouTube right from your phone. You can have it as unlisted, and you share a link. It took you no time at all to do it. And the better part of it is knowing your employees don't care if you mess up. Your employees don't care if the dog was in the background or when you did it or what was going on. They care that you care about them. And I think in a time where we need employees, retention is challenging, to let employees know, hey, we really care about you. We're not offering benefits because we're supposed to. We're offering them because we want to help you as a person and help you as a family. And I think that comes through a lot. And I don't know about you, but if you read something and then you hear the author read a book, you're pulled in a little more. The same message travels, that emotion travels, the feeling travels. And I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the things we talk a lot about is, especially for those solo HR teams, right?
They're
That
juggling
how
everything.
so much, and the struggle that so many times they have is moving from administrative HR tasks, which just take up the day, to really strategic people strategy, right? Like, how do you be more strategic? And, a lot of things take up that person's time that are really administrative.
Oh, their list is a mile long.
So much. And especially when it comes to benefits, those people are getting questions all the time from everyone.
Yes.
That's really administrative work. And I think what I'm hearing you say is by pulling out your phone, recording a short video, and scaling that message across, you're going to reduce the amount of people coming to you and asking those one-off questions. You're going to reduce some of that administrative work that's going to free up time for you to focus on more of the strategic HR work that your company needs you to focus on, right?
You're doing it once. So whatever that benefit is, you're doing it one time instead of talking to 10 different employees. And then when those employees still come to you, they now have an understanding. Their questions are probably going to be much more specific. You're not spending as much time educating as you are giving them the answer. And something else I want to mention based on what you just said, we also need to look at our resources. If you have a broker that you're working with, send that broker a message, call them and say, hey, I just heard this podcast and they're recommending this and I think it's great. That broker can do it for you as well. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just send that information out and ask whoever's involved. Something else to mention on this one too. Sometimes the best stories don't even come from HR. You might find employees that would love to share their story. And some people, especially the younger generation, my daughter is 10, I give her a phone and she can just whip together all kinds of fun stuff. So maybe you let your employees share some of the information about your benefits and just simply say, hey, next month we're focusing on dental insurance. Anyone have a story they want to share? So then you're not doing all of the work yourself. And I think it could be even more effective from someone who's walked in those shoes and said, hey, this is what happened to me. And this is how we got it to work out. So that's another tip too.
Such an awesome tip. Leslie, this has been such a great conversation. I'm sure we could probably just continue on this topic. It's great, but there's so much good stuff in this. As we get close to wrapping this up, one of the last questions that I really want to ask you, though, that's not